Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, we're gonna go ahead and explain a bit more about indirect illumination and how indirect illumination is treated within V-Ray. Now, before we start, if you've seen any of the previous videos in the introduction to V-Ray, you're gonna, especially the previous one or the color correction video, you're gonna notice that we are using the same exact scene, so we can further explain how GI works or global illumination works. This is a fairly simple scene. We have a simple room, a few props like the stairwells that basically lead to nowhere. We have a small hole with lighting coming from on top of it, and then we have an extra lighting that is basically only lighting up our model over here. So first of all, let's see how our setup has been set up for V-Ray. Now, for the image sampler, we have an adaptive DMC, which is okay. For the color mapping, we have Reinhardt. Again, it's okay. I can either use exponentially if I want. It's not going to be an issue. I need to make sure that both of them are set as 1, the dark and the bright multiplier, and we shouldn't have any more problems. Now, as we said, this video is going to be more about indirect illumination or global illumination. Now, before I go in and start explaining the options for indirect illumination, I would just like to take a minute to explain what indirect illumination or global illumination actually does. Here we have a simple image. Now, in this image, we can see that we have one arrow coming from this side, and the green one where it says direct light. Now, light in the physical world works pretty much this way. When it comes from a light source and it strikes a simple or some sort of a surface, it bounces off. And when it bounces off, it takes some of the information of the said surface with it, and it carries it away from that initial landing point. So you can see it from here. So this is the direct light. As soon as it hits this point, it disperses all around. Now, this or all of these red pointers are called the primary bounces. Now, light doesn't just stop there. All of these expand to a certain length, and if they hit another surface, then they bounce again. Those are called secondary bounces. For better explanation, this image is a perfect candidate. You can see the light coming through the window. It's lighting up the roof, it's lighting up the walls, and it's lighting up the plane here or the ground. Now, everything behind here or behind this square is dark, it's black, so we can't see much. This is not realistic. This is not how lighting behaves. If we have physically correct lighting, we should have global illumination or the light bouncing off of the wall and lighting up this area behind it. So if we turn global illumination on, we should get something like this. Now we have the same scene, but this time around with the primary bounces. You can see over here we have a multiplier of 0.85, which we're going to show in max, and a secondary bounces is 0.7. The light enters the room, it lights up all the areas it lit up before it, but now when it comes into contact with this wall, it bounces off and it lights up this sphere over here. And then it bounces off from it and further lights up this entire scene. So we end up with a much more realistic look of the scene. Now let's see how we can use this inside 3ds Max. Once you have V-Ray set up like this, if I just render it out right now, it looks like this. We have the light coming from the top, but pretty much the entire room looks rather dark. And if we're honest, it's really not realistic. So in order to change this, all we have to do is go in the tab of the Indirect Illumination. By default, this tab is closed, or it's off, at least for the 2.4 version. On the 3.x version, you have a different story. But by clicking on OK, the first thing that we can see is that all of these options that were grayed out previously are now opened up for changing. And this part over here, where it says primary bounces and a multiplier of 1 and a GI engine, and you have a roll down menu. We're going to go around and explain a few of these, but for now I just want to show you that we have a primary bounces, like we said, when the light first hits, and then we have a secondary bounces for when the hit or the primary bounces bounce off something else. So V-Ray with it has a few engines in which it can use to calculate how the GI or the indirect illumination is going to act. If you're using 2.x version or even the 3.x version, for the GI engine, if you don't want to use an unbiased rendering type, then I would recommend you use primary bounces irradiance map, while for your secondary bounces that you use a light cache. This combination works great when it's used because the results are pretty good and they're pretty fast. But if you want to use an unbiased approach towards rendering, then you can go ahead and instead of using a radiance map, you can brute force the entire thing by using a brute force for the primary bounces and a brute force for the secondary bounces. But the thing is, when you're using brute force for your secondary and primary bounces, the calculation times are rather more lengthy, as everything is being calculated so it's mathematically correct. And in most cases, it gives pretty good results, but it takes too long. So if you're just want to like use this for your testings or your renders, I would recommend you go irradiance map for your primary bounces and light cache for your secondary. Now, if you've noticed previously when I was changing these engines, right beneath them, you have options for them. And for the irradiance map, once you click it, you are greeted by a rather lengthy window with a lot of options. Now, I'm going to try and keep this very introductory, so I'm not going to go ahead and go deep and try to explain all of these options because there are quite many. And I'm going to try and keep it as simple as possible by just trying to explain the few simple ways to set it up. Now, first thing, I'm going to open irradiance map. And the first thing that once you open this irradiance map, you want to do is make sure that this show calculus phase thing is ticked on. That means while it's when you click render, you're not going to have to wait for the entire render to be pre-processed, but you're going to be able to see the pre-process happen in front of your eyes. You're going to see that as soon as I start the render. But for now, just remember, we want to tick this show calculus phase on. Now, the next thing you want to do is here you have a few presets. You have a very low, low, medium, medium animation, high, high animation, and a very high. In general, when you're just testing out stuff, it's a good idea to keep this at very low. And as you can see, all of these options over here, they're grayed out. The only thing that you can change are the subdivision and the interpolation samples. We're going to explain what both of these mean. So, just in case you were wondering why all of these are grayed out, you can open those if you make sure that your preset is set to custom. Now you can change all of these, especially if you know what you're doing. But for now, let's keep it at very low. And I'm gonna go ahead and simply take the HSPH subdivs to 1, as well as the interpolation samples to 1. But before I press the render, I'm gonna go downwards to light cache and just stick two things. Here we have another show calculus face button. I wanna have it clicked as well. And for the subdivs here, by default, you should have 1,000, I think. But for this case, I'm going to bring it down to 500. And I'm going to show you later how to calculate exactly how much subdivisions you will need for your seed. But before we reduce this to 1, I'm going to go ahead and get it back to 50 with 20. And simply render out this scene so you can see the difference. So this is the scene right we have now. This scene is without using Global Illumination. Now we have Global Illumination turned on. We have irradiance map for our primary bounces and secondary bounces for light cache. I'm gonna put the render on. And right away, this is why I told you to use the show calculus face option. There we go. The scene is starting to get lit up rather nicely. Now we can see that when the light is coming down, it's bouncing off, and we're starting to get a lot better detail. Now, the only thing that we're dealing with now is having to set up all the parameters right for the irradiance map as well as the light cache. Now, from what I can see here, I probably made a small mistake when I was using the adaptive DMC sampler. Yes, right here. I've set the color threshold to 0.002, and that has led me to get all of these this noise in the scene. So I'm guessing by just removing this, we should clear up the noise. Yeah, much better. Okay, let's just render out one more time. There we go. It's okay. Everything is rendering out. It takes a bit longer now, but not big of a problem because it's a small scene, so it pretty much takes just a short time. I'm gonna wait for it to render out, and now I'm gonna save this one as well and set this one as A, the other one as B. And now here is the difference between using GI and not having GI in the scene. So we haven't changed much, except we turn this on, we set it up as a irradiance map and light cache with a very low option and a light cache of 500. And this is what we ended up with. You can notice something else, except the thing that the fact that we have light protruding through the entire scene now. You can see some of the color coming from our model that's basically reflecting back on the ceiling. As you can see here, we have some blue color, and the reason for this is when the light comes in touch with our model. It basically bounces off of it, but it takes some of the information that's coming from the diffuse color of the model and is relaying it towards the other surfaces. So that's why we end up with some extra blue on the walls, we end up with some extra blue on the ground, and some red over here, some green over here. So the light, as soon as it bounces off, it takes some of the information from the original surface with it. Now, what are these options here that we can choose? For the irradiance map, we have the subdivisions and interpolation samples. If we put both of these at 1, and now I'm gonna just go ahead and select one part of the scene. Let's just take this part so we don't take too much time, and we render. You're gonna notice that our entire scene is going to look a bit weird. And when I say weird, it really does look weird. It looks like it's coming straight out of some kind of a wacky cartoon. There we go, another one. This should show it even better. Heck, it even looks like it's been tapered with a lot of glitter. Now, the reason for this is that we changed our subdivisions for the irradiance map. So now when the light is coming in the scene, it's bouncing off, it's taking some of the original color and it's relaying it over. So we can see that all the light that's coming from here, it's more or less gray. Now, as soon as it gets down to the blue, it starts reflecting it, and we can see a lot of blue squarish parts. Then we can see some of the blue on the wall, and the same thing happens with the red on the right side. We see a lot of red samples over here, and then some that are scattered around. The reason for this is that we have only one sample for the light to use. Now, for example, if we increase this to 5 samples, that means that we're gonna have more samples for the light to use, and we should get a more defined or better defined color scheme, something like this. There we go. Now we have more samples, so the colors look to be more melded together. Okay, so I'm gonna take this part one more time, and this time, instead of keeping it at 5, I'm going to increase it up to 20, and see the difference now. Now we still have some difference between all of those samples, but nowhere as colorful as it was previously. So with more subdivisions, we get more particles or more light subdivisions and better quality. Now, that subdivision basically controls how many we have in our scene. So if we up it at 40 now and we render it out again, we get a scene that's even better now. So no more splotches. We basically are getting a more clear image. Okay, let's even render out the other part so you can see it even better. We don't have so much difference between the colors like here. So there we go. Again, all the differences in color, it's slowly dissipating. So that's what we get with the HSPH subdivs. Now, what do we get with the interpolation samples? Well, the interpolation samples the easiest way to explain this would be that this is basically what we would use to blend or blur all of these samples together. For example, if I increase this to 5, all of these samples, I'm going to try to do it here, should have about 5 pixels to blur between them. If I render now, we can see that, like previously, we no longer have this well-defined shape here, like this, but instead we're going to start to get some more blurred colors. There we go, like this. Now, the issue with this is that as it is right now, it looks smudged. And the reason is that this sample size is too small. With 5, we get a lot of smudging. If we want to make sure that this smudging is corrected, we can increase this to, let's say, 20, and now render up. And there we go. No more smudging. Okay, let's go for the full render. And there we go. The smudging has been corrected. We no longer have any issues with it. And all of the light that's coming into the room is filling up the room rather nicely. So with the primary bounces or the radiance map tweaked up, we are left with our finished render looking not great, but better. So I wouldn't go any deeper, at least not for this video, about the radiance map. I'm just gonna jump down to light cache. Light cache, basically here I would make sure that I have show calculus phase on. I would pick this one, use light cache for glossy rays on. And here is the only thing that's important here, the subdivs. The subdivisions are basically controlling how much quality or how many particles are going to be used when V-Ray is trying to calculate how much light is there into the room. Now, there is a mathematical way on basically trying to calculate how much subdivisions would you need for a scene, and the easy way to calculate this would be if you want to use a calculator, and you basically do the following. You take the resolution of the image you have, so you go 800 multiplied by 800, you end up with 640,000. You put a square on this and you end up with 800 subdivisions. So for this scene, if I put in 800 subdivs, this should be the top, or for the quality for this size of the render. So if we go ahead, render it out, we shouldn't see too much of a difference because for renders that are so small, it doesn't make too much of a difference. But if this was a larger renderer or a larger render, this would have made some difference. Let's just go ahead and one more time for the whole thing. And there we go. With the GI or the Global Illumination turned on, we can see that this entire room is more or less lit up correctly now. And the only thing that we have to deal with now is that grainy look that we have. That's basically the noise in our scene, but I'm gonna keep that for the next video. So for now, I would like to close it up for the indirect illumination. So thank you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to check out the previous videos of the introduction to the V-Ray series. And also, if you enjoyed these videos and you would like me to make more, subscribe, like, comment, and share it around so it can reach more people. So take care and see you in the next video.